Hello, everybody. Welcome back or welcome to the Aural Theory series. My name is Dr. Julia Alford. In today's video, we are going to do a quick theory lesson in the German Augmented 6-chord. We're going to take a look at what it is and how to listen for it in a harmonic dictation. So let's go ahead and jump in. If you're new to the series and you need to back up a bit, there's a link below to a playlist that this is part of that goes through all of harmonic dictation, and you can check it out. So let's go. Okay, so what is the German Augmented 6-chord? It is a chromatic predominant chord. It is one of 3 augmented 6 chords that we have. It's the only one I'm going to focus on right now, basically because it's the easiest to hear. It sounds dominant, but it doesn't behave like a dominant chord. It actually goes to another dominant chord. So it functions, if we're thinking about function, it functions as a predominant. And it has a very specific structure that is really kind of easy to hear. So let's take a look at what it looks like. So I'm going to draw it out. So we're in A minor. It always has lay in the bass, always. And then what makes it an augmented 6 is that you also have phi. So lay, just so you know, we are using movable do solfege, so it is the 6th scale degree in minor. If you are in major, you need to exercise or you need to implement mode mixture because it has to be the lowered 6th scale degree that we find in minor keys. It can't be la. So lay, and then that is coupled with phi. Here we have between these 2 notes an augmented 6, and that is going to create a tension that has to pull outwards. Your ear might identify it as a minor 7th, and we'll get into why that is in a minute. So that's your augmented 6th interval. And then we also always, for the German, it's always going to have do, and then it's going to have may. So again, it has to be that 3rd scale degree in minor. Oops. I can spell. There we go. All right, so now the sound of it, why it sounds dominant, because if we take this chord and I were to respell it, I'm going to keep the lay, the do, the may, and if I made that D sharp into an E flat, let's collapse it a little bit, F, A, C, E flat, what does that spell? That spells an F dominant 7, but its function here is an augmented 6 chord, okay? And not just any augmented 6, but a German augmented 6 chord. Okay, so let's take a quick listen to how that sounds. Right, so it really does sound, it sounds like a dominant chord out of context. So let's look at some other ways that this chord can be written. So if we look at it, you could still have the lay and the do, and then you could kind of switch the upper 2 voices. So you could have phi in an inner voice, and then have that may up higher. You could move this lay down an octave and really spread it out, have phi in the tenor, and then put the C or the may in the alto, and then of course we have to keep appropriate spacing, and then so you could have the do and the soprano. Okay, so you're probably asking yourself, so if it just sounds dominant, why don't we just label a dominant chord? Well, one is the spelling. So visually, it's definitely not a dominant chord. But if we look at it in terms of function, it's the way that it's going to behave. It's always the strongest predominant. You're not going to go from a German augmented 6 to a 4 or to diminished 6. It's always the strongest. You could have a 4 and then a German. You could have a 2 diminished 6 and then a German. You could have all kinds of things and then the German. But the German augmented 6 chord, or really any augmented 6 chord, is the strongest one, and it's what has to go to the dominant chord. So if we take a look at this and we take a look at this chord, and I'm just going to resolve it straight to the 5 chord. Okay, so if we take And the lay, just a little bit of voice leading, lay always has to go to sol, and fi always has to go to sol. Okay, so you get this resolution out to sol in both voices. It's this tension that has to resolve outwards. Yeah, and is always outwards because lay is always in the bass. And then if we go straight to the 5 chord, and you get F to C, that's a 5th, right? And then E to B, that's also a 5th. So there we have parallel 5ths, and we're not allowed to have that. Now you'll see composers do all kinds of fancy voice leading and things and more complicated pieces to kind of work around that to go to what appears to be a straight resolution, skipping over the conventional 6/4. But if you dig deeper, there's always something a little tricky that they do in there to skip around the parallel 5ths. So a proper resolution, so right now we would label this as an augmented 6, German augmented 6 to a 5 chord. Okay, so let's actually look at this in terms of going to the conventional 6/4 chord. Okay, so for the resolution, we're still going to resolve out our tendency tones, and then, but these two up here are going to stay put. Okay, so that gives us the first half of a conventional 6/4 chord, and then that can resolve either to the 5 or the 5/7, and I'll play both for you. I'm going to leave that in place for a specific reason, just so you see. So then this will come down here to the G sharp, and then this will come down to the B. So that is our 5/6/4 to a 5/3. Okay, and that, my friends, sounds like this. Okay, and then if we switch out, and this is why I didn't skip the octave, because we want this to go down to the 7th. We'll relabel that here. So 5/8/6/4 to 7/5/3, and that's going to sound like this. Okay. Now let's take a look at it, how it could look in a progression. So here we have just a one. Now normally it's not this simple, right? You would have a predominant, maybe tonic expansion, and then a predominant, and then the German, something more extended. But just to show simply, you see in the bass you've got do, lay, sol, sol, do. Okay, and here's what that sounds like. Okay, so hit the subscribe button if you would. I would love that. Hit the like button if you liked this. Share us with your friends, and come back for some dictation practice in the next video. I'll check you out there. Bye.